Sal, I'm really excited to be here with you because I've been visiting schools over the last year to see what's happening with AI, and I feel like last year was like AI mania in schools. And it was like this binary narrative of like tragic and magic. And tragic was like the doomsayers. AI chatbots are going to ruin education with mass cheating. And then there were the like accelerationists. AI tools are going to magic education instantly into some revolutionary, functioning, beautiful thing, and we should use chatbots right away. And so I'm glad to see you because you're on the ground and you can actually tell us what's happening and not prognosticate. So tell us, best case scenario, what do you envision with AI tutoring bots?
Yeah, it's good to think about where this could go, and then we could think about all the pitfalls that we're all collectively probably going to face on the way there. Look, the dream, a lot of folks know how I got started on this journey on Khan Academy. I started tutoring cousins, and word spreads in my family, free tutoring is going on, and before I know it, I'm tutoring 10, 15 cousins, and I start making exercises for them. That was the first Khan Academy, so they can get practice. And then I made tools for me to keep track. Those were our first teacher tools. Then I started making videos. And if you think about everything that Khan Academy has been doing over the last 15, 20 years, it's been trying to scale up or approximate in rough ways what I was able to do at Nadia back in 2004. And science fiction authors have always written about some ideal state that one day you might have artificial intelligences sophisticated enough to actually do exactly what I was doing for Nadia back in 2004. And at Khan Academy, we always held it as this far-out ideal that might happen in someone else's lifetime or something. But I don't think it's ridiculous. Now, there's a lot of things to consider, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you are going to see, the AI on Khan Academy, Khanmigo is already doing a lot of this, but in the 5 to 10 year time frame, it's going to be able to do a lot more of what I was able to do with my cousins back then. And one thing that we're realizing, and anyone who's been a tutor would realize this, that we always associate tutoring as hey, I'm going to explain how to factor a polynomial, or I'm going to explain entropy, or exactly how the constitution works. But a lot of the tutoring is about motivation and making sure that the students are showing up. And I think you're going to see that. AI is being more multimodal and being able to ping the teacher, ping the parent, ping the student, and get them to engage in their learning. So I think that's happening. And on the other side of the equation, teachers. If you told every teacher in the country or on the planet, hey, we just discovered a few $1 billion, we're going to hire amazing teaching assistants for you to help you with lesson planning and grading and progress report writing. And by the way, they're also going to be able to walk around your classroom and tutor kids, but report back to you, you're in charge. Teachers say, wow, finally, this is going to be a golden age of teaching, finally. And I don't think that's outlandish. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you are going to see that type of power.
I heard that years ago you used to give new employees one of these science fiction books in which there was a tutoring bot like this.
Yeah, amongst science fiction nerds, there's several books that keep getting cited about this ideal state. One is Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. Science fiction nerds in the audience. In Diamond Age, it takes place in this neo-Victorian China in the not-too-distant future, let's call it in the next 50 years type of time frame. And there's a member of nobility who commissions a tablet app, essentially. And this was very prescient. This was written in the 90s, so we didn't have iPads back then. So Neil Stephenson was pretty prescient. He imagines this member of nobility commissioning a tablet app for his granddaughter to be her tutor, an artificially intelligent tablet app. And it's called the Young Ladies Illustrated Primer. And it gets bootlegged, and it gets in the hands of these orphan girls living on barges, and they kind of just take over because they're able to get a free education, a free world-class education that before was only accessible to the elite. And so, Khan Academy, our mission, free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And you could imagine part of the inspiration, I didn't think we were going to be able to build exactly the Young Ladies Illustrated Primer when I filled out the paperwork to be a nonprofit in 2008. But that was always like, hey, that could be a vision. There's Ender's Game. Many of y'all, there was a movie as well, Orson Scott Card book. Society is facing an existential challenge, aliens, they're going to come back. We're going to face another battle. And they realize that adults are already, we're too set in our ways to be really good military strategists. So they start finding the most high potential kids from around the planet when they're like 9 years old, and they take them to this battle school. And this is like existential, to be our generals in this existential struggle. And then they also use AI as part of their training. So yes, I used to circulate these books. I stopped because I realized, I reread it and I'm like, well, there's a couple of scenes in the book that are like cyberpunk. Anyway, I don't want to go into any details.
So before I ask you though, how far we are along this trajectory, because in the Diamond Age, the primer could hear everything the child heard and see everything and respond in real time to individual kids. Before we get to how far along we are on that trajectory, Khan Academy developed a tutoring bot, and there's a really fascinating origin story to do with AP biology, and I was hoping you might, for those of you who haven't heard it, tell us a little.
Yeah, and I didn't know the origin story initially. Summer of 2022, Sam Altman and Greg Brockman send me an email and say, we're about to train our next generation model, what would eventually be GPT-4, and we think this is going to be the model that wakes people up to what AI is possible, but it might actually be scary because it's so powerful. So we want to lead with social positive use cases, with organizations that people trust, that have the technical capability to take advantage of them. This is their own words. It's like, Khan Academy was the first people we thought of. And they had another motivation, to your point, behind the scenes. It actually also turned out, I didn't know when they sent this email, that when they had made GPT-3, and they had Bill Gates told this to me, when they had demoed it to Bill Gates, GPT-3, Bill told Sam and Greg, this is cute, but I'll really be impressed when this can pass an AP biology exam. And so...
and he thought he was sending them away for 5 years.
Yeah, he saw, whatever, these guys are going to... and so it was interesting, and I didn't know that would happen behind the scenes. I only learned that 2 months later. But so in July or August of 2022, we're on Zoom or Hangout or something, and it was myself, Kristen, who was on a panel earlier, our chief learning officer, and Sam and Greg, and they have a kind of a chat bot set up with GPT-4, and there's an AP Bio question. And then they say, Sal, so what do you think the answer is? And I said, oh, it's about osmosis. I think it's C. It said it's C, and then I said, oh, that's kind of interesting. Can you have it explain why it's C? It did, and awfully well. And I was pretty well versed in GPT-2 and 3. I knew what it could do, and I was like, this is different. Then I said, explain why the other choices aren't right. It explained it quite well. Can you write another question like this? It did it, and that's when I was like, okay, this is a game changer. Now, we got access to it. We got under a non-disclosure agreement. We started working. There was a lot of edge cases. It was hallucinating, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, one of the reasons why they were reaching out to us was exactly that. They wanted to launch, and we ended up partnering and launching in March of 2023. But part of it was we have, probably outside of the College Board, the largest bank of AP biology questions. And so part of our partnership is also trying to evaluate how good the AI is at those types of things. And we have a mutual benefit here, because the better it can get at those types of things, the better at tutor it's going to get. Now, we're very careful that we're not using the students' data, but if we can use some of our content to make the AI better, we're happy to do that.
And so they went back to Bill Gates, having trained it on you.
Well, they didn't train it on it. They actually they used it a little bit to evaluate, and we still have some things going on behind the scenes. But we started hacking, and people forget because it all feels like it's been there forever, but this was 3 or 4 months before ChatGPT comes out. Our team starts playing around with it. We started realizing there's a lot of power, but there's a lot of, math especially. It was horrible at math. We actually did help them identify some mistakes in the training data, and later, myself, Kristen, and a few other team members, we actually did do some fine-tuned training of the model. For those of y'all, there's the general training where you're just slurping in the internet, but then with these models, you can do fine-tuned trainings where you essentially have experts who you say, okay, tutor in this way, it gives a response, and then the expert says, well, I'd give that response a 2 out of 7. This is what I would have written. And you keep doing that. So I personally spent about 20 hours. So that was that's what we helped contribute. But then I remember in November of 2022, when ChatGPT came out, I slacked Greg Brockman. I was like, what's going on? you have us under a non-disclosure agreement, but you've just launched something. And Greg's like, we haven't launched anything. We just put a chatbot in front of GPT 3.5, which had been out for months, and the whole world woke up to it. And I was really worried because GPT 3.5 is a way inferior model to GPT 4, and ChatGPT was not built for education. So immediately the narrative became cheating, hallucinations, math errors, while we were putting in guardrails around safety, et cetera. So I was afraid that the baby was going to get thrown out with the bathwater. But the good news was, by March of 2023, people, especially in the education world, said, hey, we can't just ignore this stuff. We can't just ban it. But if only there was a way to use it with the proper guardrails, pedagogically positive, if we could get the math working, if we could get the hallucinations to an acceptable rate, then this could be a powerful tool.
And so can you talk about some of the guardrails you built into the tutoring bot and how that's different, building something for schools, than schools just using a consumer product off the shelf like ChatGPT?
Yeah, I remember we had pretty intense debates inside the organization as soon as a critical mass of our team had access, and now I'm talking about September, October of 2022, and it was the hardest secret to keep, by the way. I have trouble keeping secrets, and I couldn't tell anyone. And the debates were above and beyond the errors that it could make, but this could be a cheating tool. What if a student asks to make a bomb, or what if they want to do something explicit or just inappropriate? How do we make sure we're protecting the student's data here? So we very quickly started putting layers on it to make the math better. And a lot of it is anchoring on the content that we already had. When I first saw that demo, I was like, oh, wow, is all of this stuff that we've invested in Khan Academy for years going to become worthless now? But we very quickly realized that these models, even though at first they look like they're generating good content, about 30% of the time there's something not quite right about it. And so one of the main ways of getting the errors down is anchoring it on vetted high-quality content, and we have a huge library of that. So we're going to do that. We're going to steer it so it acts as a Socratic tutor, but it will not cheat. And we put a lot of guardrails, and we did a lot of Red Hat testing to make sure that...
So a student can say to it, solve this quadratic equation for me.
Yes, it will politely tell you, hey, I'm your tutor, let's work through it together, et cetera, et cetera. All of the interactions for an under 18 user are transparent to the parents and the teachers. We have a second AI that's moderating the conversations. If a student says, can you teach me how to make a bomb, or I want to harm myself, it's going to shut down that conversation, and it's going to then actively notify parents, teachers, and we're just adding this feature now. It's going to notify administrators as well. They've asked for that. They're like, hey, this could be a real issue. We want to make sure that we are in the loop. And then none of the interactions that are going between the student and the AI is going to be used for training of future models, and that's just to make sure that there's no leakage of any personally identifiable information. And then on top of that, we are de-identifying data between the Conmigo experience and the underlying model, so that there's even less of a chance of that happening. So there's more guardrails around data privacy, et cetera, but I would encourage, it's not... anyone who's using this stuff, just make sure that there are the right protections in place.
Because we heard Sam Altman earlier this morning saying, we have this free tool for schools, AI is going to transform education, but there are all those questions you raised about what happens when a student or teacher enters something, what happens to their data, and what happens when ChatGPT gives them the wrong information.
Yeah, and ChatGPT and ChatGPT Pro, they're obviously very powerful, general purpose, I guess you could call them productivity or research type of tools. But I think this is, that's an example of it's a raw tool, you throw it on the other side. And I just talked about a lot of the guardrails, but there's also a lot of what do you design on the application layer so that you can get the best out of it? So there's going to be a subset of teachers that are essentially prompt engineers who might be able to write these but that's probably 1% of teachers. And even then, there's some infrastructure you want, so it actually, I don't want to get into all the details, so it actually does a good job at it. So that's where you want applications that, first of all, are special purpose. Hey, I'm going to help you with the lesson plan. I'm going to help you with an IEP. I'm going to help you with writing this progress report, or on the tutoring side, or when we have activities where students can talk to simulations of historical characters. How do we make sure that's going well, that it's safe, that it's historically accurate as much as possible? So, a lot of people associate me with technology, but I've always said never put the technology first. Always put the use case and the pedagogy first. And the use case in the pedagogy in schools for the most part is more personalization, better support and motivation for students. And for teachers, it's better support and information for the teachers. And then start from there and then build the tools. ChatGPT as a raw tool, first of all, I would definitely use ChatGPT Pro, which is based on GPT-4, and that's pretty costly, by the way. But you use that, I think that certain teachers might be okay with it, but once again, I think you can package it much better so it's easier for them to use. What we're finding is we're going into districts. We have about 95,000 students and teachers using it right now. It's probably going to be on the order of 1 million this time next year. It takes a lot of product hand-holding and then training and professional development to make people comfortable with this. And then for students, I don't think that's an appropriate tool for most students under 18. Maybe some juniors and seniors might use it in certain cases. And even in higher ed, we could talk more, but we're definitely putting processes in the workflow to undermine the cheating process and things like that. But not just about cheating, but also give more transparency so that the process of how you write a paper and stuff is understood by the teachers.
We talked about how in the United States, about every 5 to 10 years, some new technology comes out, and the tech industry tells us it's going to transform education, whether it's during the Sputnik era when Congress passed a law and put tens of millions of dollars into motion pictures, because there were like reels in schools where like Nobel Prize winning physicists were going to give physics lectures and transform education, or radio, or one laptop per child. If we give every kid a laptop, it will transform education. And the studies showed that it didn't have an improvement in education. It just caused kids to use more technology. So now, we're using almost exactly the same rhetoric about here's this technology, it's going to transform education. How do we make sure that this disappointment and kind of overhype doesn't happen this time?
Yeah, I think it all boils down to, there has been good things that have happened over that. Even, broadcasting lectures and things like that. There are probably today physicists that you could find that says, I was inspired because I saw that documentary.
Have you seen these videos? It's like...
Yeah, well, yes. Well, the Feynman lectures famously are
right.
world class. But inspired myself. But and we see this at Khan Academy too, that we get letters every day from, there's a young girl in Afghanistan who's used Khan Academy when the Taliban said that she couldn't go to school, and now she's a quantum computing researcher at Tufts, and this was essentially her education. And so that's the example that before this type of technology, a young girl like Sola, or a kid in rural Alaska, or a kid in urban San Francisco, and their school does not offer a rigorous calculus course, they had no options. And so that already exists, that they actually have something, they have a lifeline. And I think the question now, even before generative AI, that there's 50 plus efficacy studies on Khan Academy, they all have the same narrative. If students are able to put 60 minutes a week in, they're growing 30, 40, 50% faster than their comparable peers. So it really boils down to a motivation question. And so what we are seeing, that's where the real game is. Obviously, we have to make the product as usable as possible so that it can motivate. AI, we think, can help a lot. Actually, I think that's where the real benefit's going to be on the engagement side of things, on the teacher and the student side. But that's where it's important to also work with the human systems, the districts, the teachers, and make sure they're bought in, because we are seeing that if you do professional development well, you're bringing the teachers along, that it's not viewed as some type of attention, that this is a tool for them. Newark, New Jersey, you did a story about Newark, New Jersey, and they're using even pre-AI Khan Academy pretty intensely. It's the North Ward of Newark that started last year. It's because the systems they put in place of really motivating the schools, the teachers, and the students to do it, they're seeing some very, very promising outcomes. And so as a technologist, I see it as a combination. We have to make the tools as good as possible, as usable as possible, as accessible as possible, but we can't shy away from the human systems. And the one silver lining, or there's many, but what's exciting about AI, every other tool before AI, you go to the teacher and you're like, hey, here it is, here are the efficacy studies, and they say, this is great, and they usually want to use it, but then they go home and they're like, oh my God, I already have to grade these papers, I have 10 different things to do, this is one more thing. AI, yes, is another thing, but we have a local district here who's already told us that they're seeing Conmigo save their teachers at least 5 hours per week of their own time, doing things like lesson planning and grading papers and things like that. And so this is the first time that technologists can go to the teachers and say, yes, there is going to be a learning curve, but there's a direct dividend to you. It's going to be more energy for you and more energy for your students if you get past that hurdle. So it's finally the message is not one more thing. It's one more thing that will hopefully reduce your burden, not increase it.
Well, thank you. We'll be following along to see how it goes.
Thank you.